So, Five Nights at Freddy's is the latest horror film based on the hit video game with a whole lot of lore behind it. Um, so I think I have a little bit of a knowledge of Five Nights at Freddy's, but obviously not as much as the crowd that I saw this with because they picked up on every little bit, every little Easter egg, and there's a lot of Easter eggs. That's probably an understatement. I mean, watching this film, at least from my perspective of the limited knowledge that I do have of Five Nights at Freddy's, which I will willingly admit to while watching this, it felt like watching a film that was kind of like, oops, all Easter eggs, and it's just like all this referential stuff. But I kind of said this with my Super Mario review, is that I felt like it was a bit too like that video game film was a bit too passive, and it had like a lot of it doled out a lot of Easter eggs and a lot of fan service. I was okay with most of it. So like, you know what, it's being playful, and it's still a coherent story, and it's a lot like it's the same way I felt about Sonic the Hedgehog. I didn't really like Sonic the Hedgehog all that much either, but it's still like it's fine. Like it's still a competent story. I can tell I can recognize the beginning, middle, and end. I can see what the hero wants, what the villain wants, and it's a cohesive enough story where if someone wasn't familiar with the games, they could just walk right into these films and totally understand what's going on. I have played like the first game, and I have a little bit of knowledge of like some of this other lore, but like having just that knowledge, this film was completely incoherent to me, and it's mostly because once you start thinking about how this plot unfolds, this entire story, it's just like there's so many gaping holes with it that just like you can't, that like I couldn't quite ignore it. And it's one of those things where it's a film that it's clearly loaded up with a lot of stuff that fans love, because fans were just cheering, going nuts for it. I saw it with all the fans surrounding me. So obviously they picked up on everything, but I was still just kind of a little bit in the dark. And I know that for fans of the games, and who have played all the games, who have read all the books and the comic books, they'll pick up on everything, where I know their immediate response to that response is that, well, you should play all the games, you should pick up on all the lore, you should watch all the YouTube videos, you should read through some of the books, so you can understand all the references that are being doled out on screen. But the thing is, if you want people to do that, you have to make a film that's at least like accessible. That's why we get that's why we get so many comic book movies. A lot of these, the Marvel and the DC films, for the ones that are coherent and people, gravitate towards, they're made in a way where you don't have to have all this foreknowledge coming in to recognize and enjoy the film. And at least for me, while I was watching Five Nights at Freddy's, it felt like I was so much in the dark here. And it feels like it shouldn't, because like the original game, it was a simple thing. It's a security guard. He's got to survive 5 nights, and animatronics at this, creepy Chuck E. Cheese place, are coming to kill him, and he's got to find a way to survive those 5 nights. Simple survival stuff, it's a simple enough story where, you could, just on that, I think if you just focus on that first game as a film, there's a lot that you could build up the darkness with that, the anticipation, the uncertainty, you could just keep it going, and just the anticipation that the animatronics are going to come out and kill this security guard. That's a pretty good film right there, maybe even like a short film. But it felt like this film had to cover so much, and covered so much ground with all these characters, that it just shoved it all into this incoherent mess that it rarely had a lot of time to to get to know and care for these characters, to see if they'll survive all this, let alone understand anything that's going on here. Because there's a lot on the plate for the main character here of Mike Schmidt, played by Josh Hutcherson. He's a dude who's been traumatized, since he was a kid because his brother was taken away from him. He's trying to care for his sister, but he's in a custody battle. He's low on funds. He can't maintain a job. He's worried about paying off his house. He's traumatized that it affects everything that he does at his security jobs. So he's given one last chance, to work at Freddy's, this long abandoned, creepy pizza entertainment chain with animatronics there to prove himself. And that's right there. That's enough. That's plenty to build on with that character. If you show how everything progresses there, where you show the concerns about money, you show the frustrations with maintaining his family. He has problems connecting with his sister Abby, played by Piper Rubio, does a pretty good job here. So there's a lot just on that. And then, you throw in the creepy animatronics and, just having these nightmares about his brother being abducted. That's enough to build on. But we don't get time to appreciate any of that. And as a result, it feels like it's just kind of like zooming through like a lot of these archetypes really quickly, just so that we can get to the intricate animatronics of the Freddy's Fazbear's Pizza, which, to their credit, they're made by like the Jim Henson Creature Workshop, and they are definitely the best thing about this film. They're they look like they do in the games. They're fairly expressive. They're detailed. They move well enough, and they move believably, and in a way where you could believe like they're animatronics with how they're framed. They are definitely the best part of the film. Unfortunately, that's kind of like a sign of what type of film this is going to be, because like the Jim Henson Workshop, usually when they make, those, like life-size animatronics and puppets like that, those are usually highly, highly intricate puppets that, they're going to be worried about. That's like nothing's going to happen to them. So I knew for certain, like, nothing violent is going to happen to these things, and they're probably not going to do anything all that violent to their victims that, break into their establishment and they try to kill. That isn't going to be like off screen, or, they're going to throw in like some CGI on top of that. Like, clearly these animatronics are not going to be doing a lot. In fact, there's a scene where Mike comes up to one with like with a chair with the intent to like smash it over one of them. And I knew the moment that he started doing that, it's like, he's not going to do that. There is no way that they would let him do it with these animatronic puppets. Because I thought that was like the one thing that would surprise me if they actually like tried to smash up these puppets, and like showed like like the parts of them coming off and showed like their creepy endoskeletons inside. That would go the extra mile to make them creepy, but at the same time, it's like they're very intricate. I doubt they're going to go that far, and sure enough, they didn't here. And the other thing too is with how like progressively quick it goes through all these elements, it forgets a lot about what's like the motivations of a lot of these characters. Like at one point, Mike meets Vanessa, a local police officer played by Elizabeth Lale, and you immediately know she's up to something. Like there's not even like there's not even like a moment where you feel like, oh, this is someone I can trust. Like the moment that she shows up and she's just kind of casually brushing off the fact that Mike got stabbed in one of his dreams, and just acts like, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place is just still like a fun place, even though it's like creepy and abandoned, and this chipper attitude she has to everything, you immediately know that something is up. The same goes for Matthew Lillard's character, who, when he first shows up as this guy trying to get Mike his job, you immediately know he's up to something creepy, and that there's some, big reveal with Mike, the way like that he doesn't quite say his entire name, just the way he acts, which, I mean, fair enough. Matthew Lillard is pretty good in like creepy roles. That's what you want him for. But it's just like, much like with Hutcherson here, he's served up a script that just, it does him no favors. Matthew Lillard is barely in the film. In the few scenes he gets, he's delivered kind of dialogue that he's, it feels like he's trying to make like lemonade out of rocks here with what he's given to work with. That it feels like, they're so beholden to sticking to everything that needs to be in this film that I don't feel like they can really develop much as characters, which is kind of in stark contrast when you have Aunt Jane, who's Mike's aunt, trying to wrestle away Abby for custody. She's played by Mary Stuart Masterson, who, I swear, with her and like the lawyer character, it feels like they were given notes and told that this was going to be a comedy. So you got to like play it up as like, exaggerated and ridiculous as you can, which, if that was their intent, like they do the best that they can. Like I mean, I like the little touches with Masterson, with how like at one point she meets at a diner and she's like, being very physical around her lawyer, and at one point she just like steals a whole bunch of like sugar packets when the scene ends. Just little touches like that where it felt like a completely different film. And this is one of those things, like, I want to stress, like, every actor here is doing their best with the roles they're given. It's just the script is so, like, it's garbage, because it doesn't firmly establish these characters. There's more questions than what's revealed with them. Like the whole deal with Mike losing his brother in Nebraska, but we never quite settle on like where the state that they're currently in is at. Not to mention, they're vacationing in Nebraska. So, like, what was the context of that? Not to mention, like, when the central villain is revealed by the very end, there's still a lot of questions that I don't quite understand. Like, I don't know why the villain is, murdering children who are like ghost children coming into these like animatronic puppets. Like, what's the intent with like his Muppet murder factory here? Because like, like with other video game films that I haven't been that big on, I can tell you what Dr. Robotnik's intent is. I can tell you what Bowser's intent is in the Super Mario Brothers movie. I can't tell you what the villain of this film is trying to do. And I'm sure there is an answer that, if I went through all the games and I read through all the books and I looked up, like YouTube theory videos and looked on the Wikipedia articles, I could probably figure out the answer through there. But if the film itself can't give an answer for why the villain does the things that the villain does, that's not the fault of the viewer for not picking up on that. And the thing is, like, these issues could be, they could all be forgiven, if there was like at least like some, like if I was like getting more into like the atmosphere, if like, if there were some good kills and some creepy atmosphere, something more engaging to make me forget about all like these gaping plot holes, then that would work. That would actually be up for that. But because like the film is trying to cover so many story beats, insert so much lore, and just cover all like these Easter eggs and references that all the fans are clearly going to get, and everyone who hasn't done all their homework and studied up on it is not going to recognize this stuff. It's like night and day. Like, fans are just going to be loving, because like, oh, I get the reference, and everyone else who hasn't, studied up on all the Five Nights at Freddy's research is just going to be like, wait, why was the villain doing this? Wait, how does the dream logic work here? Like, so do the ghost children respond to the drawings, or what is happening here? Not to mention, like I said, like, it's not that scary with what it sets up, but it's also got like an off tone. Like, there's moments where it's trying to be cute with the puppets, where it's just trying to, make them more friendly, which I could almost buy if it were for the fact that, like, there's a moment where like there's kind of like an innocence that gets evoked, but it immediately goes from just like creepy to playful. And there isn't that moment where just like, Mike kind of has like that connection with the kids, which I feel like this film would benefit if it just slowed down and just gave enough time to appreciate what the characters are doing here. Because like, Mike, having lost his little brother and, fearing that he's dead, and wanting a chance to reconnect again, that would have been a perfect connection between him and the animatronics, since they're all possessed by ghost children, and sort of give him a little bit of like, closure to that degree. But it just kind of gets forgotten over the course of just, finding extra stuff for the characters to do and injecting more and more of the lore into it, as though the film is just like a laundry list of stuff it's got to cover, and it's got to like tick every single box here. Because like I've said in my review of like the Super Mario Brothers movie, where I felt like, the best way that most people are going to enjoy it is if, like they came in with like a mental checklist of everything that this film had to do to satisfy the fans by oh, they have to bring up this character, they have to reference, this event, this location, they have to bring up, this line, these things that I recognize from the game, that you'll be able to love it more. Here with Five Nights at Freddy's, I feel like you almost have to. You have to come in with that laundry list of everything that you recognize from the games, because I feel like because all the fans are just pointing at the screen. It's like, I recognize that, oh wait, I remember this from the game, which to his credit, I'm glad that all the kids were enjoying that, getting to point out everything here. But as for myself, just kind of as someone who hasn't picked up on all the lore, if you're in the dark, you want a film to, kind of get you interested to go check it out for yourself, so that, so that you're intrigued enough, or it's like, oh, I'm curious, what is this character doing, and how does this relate to what the animatronics were doing, and what's up with that lore? Like, you should be interested. Here it almost feels like a threat. Like, if you don't understand this stuff, it's just like, well, you have to go into the games and read that, and then it feels like you have to do homework to come in just to understand what is happening in the film. Not even to find it entertaining, just to understand what is even going on and what all the references are. But even on that level of just like trying to, connect how all this stuff in the movie relates to the lore and the franchise and the games, and the YouTube theories and, like the YouTubers they push into the film, even if recognizing all that, it still doesn't, the film itself still has a lot of problems. Like, I never really liked Mike as a character. I didn't like that everything had to be spoon-fed to him, where it felt like he was, even though he's like the central hero here, it felt like he was a passenger in the story, where it's like he doesn't get to look up the research on Freddy's. He doesn't understand all the logic about the ghost kids and the animatronics. Like, everything has to be explained to him in a manner where, I almost kind of empathize with Mike, because like he's coming in here and so it's like, oh, you don't know the Freddy lore? Well, here, I'm gonna explain everything to you. Like that one person next to you in the theater is just like, okay, but well, this relates to that, and that, here that this relates to like the third game where you saw, and it just goes on and on like that throughout the film. So obviously fans are probably gonna like this film. Fans probably were gonna like this film from like before they saw the first frame of it, but as someone who's only played one of the games and has like a very tertiary knowledge of this franchise, the film is just like a mess. Like, it's all over the place. I couldn't really understand the intent of a lot of the characters, and I didn't feel that I got to spend enough time with them to care about whether or not they would survive all this, let alone understand the mechanics and the intent of the murderous Muppet pizza factory here. Which, and like I said, I'm not looking for anything like intricate or detailed that has to be fully explained. Just a little bit of like coherence, that this story is like building on something, as opposed to just being an and then story. Because like, a compelling film would be like, oh, well, this character did this, and that leads to this happening, which leads to this happening, which leads to this happening. And this is very much and then this happens, and then this happens, and then there's this reference, and then there's this character, and then there's this character, and then there's this reference, and it just keeps piling on top of itself, and it doesn't really build on anything, that it just kind of forgets about so much that it sets up in the film. So I wish I could be with this film, but honestly, when compared to like something like Willy's Wonderland, which I was kind of like okay with, which is, a lot of people saw as like the knockoff Five Nights at Freddy's, I actually kind of like Willy's Wonderland a little bit more after seeing Five Nights at Freddy's, because again, I can tell you what the hero is doing in that film. I can tell you what the villains are doing in that film, and I can tell you the backstory that they establish within Willy's Wonderland. But Five Nights at Freddy's, it feels like I have to do homework just to, understand everything that's happening here, let alone finding it entertaining. So yeah, this movie's just a mess.